Welcome back to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. On today's show, it is our great honor and privilege to be joined by Dr. Motta. If you're into the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast network, you will have come across a podcast that we released on Restoring Darkness on January 2nd. This podcast shook the lighting industry a little bit, Greg, don't you think?
Yeah, it's fair to say.
So Dr. Motta has been in practice at North Shore Medical Center in Salem, Massachusetts since 1983, recently retiring in 2022. He is a graduate of Boston College with a BS in physics and biology and of Tufts Medical School. He is board certified in internal medicine and cardiology and is a fellow of the American College of Cardiology and of the American Society of Nuclear Cardiology. He's an associate professor of medicine at Tufts University School of Medicine. Dr. Motta has long been active in organized medicine, both in with the American Medical Association and the Massachusetts Medical Society, holding a number of posts through the years. He is a past president of the Massachusetts Medical Society. He was elected and served 8 years on the AMA Council of Science and Public Health, and then was elected to the Board of Trustees of the AMA in 2018, recently completing his term. In May of 2023, at its annual meeting, the MMS awarded Dr. Motta its highest honor, the Award for Distinguished Service. He is also has a lifelong interest in astronomy, dark skies, looking at the stars, all that kind of thing. Before we get to our conversation with Dr. Motta, though, Greg, we got to get a grip here, man. We got to get a grip on griplocksystems.com.
That's right. Hey, where it stops, it locks. With chain, you can't do that. You have to adjust it and do all this. The Grip Lock Cable Gripper, a unique self-locking, completely adjustable device to securely lock onto a large range of aircraft cables. No tools needed, up or down or up, as often as you like. Check it out, Grip Lock.
You don't want to be a loser and use Jack Chain. Jack Chain is for amateurs. You want to use Grip Lock Systems. Go to griplocksystems.com. Of course, National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, Greg. I think we have become very innovative and very active in the lighting industry, putting out all
That's
sorts
right.
of content and working to improve this industry. And sometimes it seems like we're always on the front lines of that. So if you have light bulbs in a warehouse and you want to join us in improving the lighting industry, you go to naild.org. We have a control certification coming up at Lightivation in June. We have a conference coming up in September, a convention coming up in September, nailed.org. And of course, Greg, I'm going to be at Light Fair, May 4th through 8th. Where are you going to be?
I'm going to be there, and you know what? I see it on their website. Grip Lock is as well. That's a place to be if you're in lighting. You better get to Light Fair.
Get to Light Fair. Dr. Motta, welcome to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast.
All right, thank you. Happy to be here.
So after the podcast was released, there were some news articles put out, and there, particularly one from Inside Lighting by Al Usinski, and he went through the whole podcast and got comments from the IES. And what I'm concerned about here is we have a massive stock of installed inventory in our lighting infrastructure in the United States and in Canada that is within that range that you identified of nanometers as problematic. Has the deployment of LED light fixtures, Dr. Motta, become a public health concern? Is that fair to say?
Well, yes, for people who are aware of it, it's not very widely known, unfortunately.
And would you suggest that it's time for people to start discussing this openly as a major problem, especially within the lighting industry?
I would hope so. Years ago, the lighting industry was denying that anything they produced could cause harm, which is typical of an industry response whenever they're pointed out that you're causing harm. They finally caught up with the AMA's response with their latest manual in 2022. So they've kind of turned the corner, although there are still quite a number of lighting professionals who continue to deny the issue. I'm glad to see the IAS, though, has come around and pretty much endorsed what the AMA was saying 10 years before them.
Could you, I know any of us could and should listen to the podcast you did before or read any of your articles and things, but can you sum up what you see as a major issue with LED lighting?
Okay. Well, back when LEDs would be first introduced around 2010, it was just manufacturing wise easier to make 4000K lights, mainly because the way they manufactured with a blue pump LED, they're coated with a phosphor. And, companies did not know the most optimal way to apply that to get a lower CCT back then. So they basically produced a lot of high blue LED fixtures, most of which were made in China and shipped to the US. Um, and many companies built up huge stocks of these and then tried to sell them. The AMA's response to that was slow down. You really should take into account the high blue content and its damage to the human endocrine system by suppressing melatonin and the potential damage it causes. And then the environmentalists also were very much concerned because of the environmental damage of high blue at night. So when we published our paper in 2016 about adverse human health effects of the high blue content LEDs, around that same time, 3000K lights became feasible and were basically the same price. So the AMA papers basically stated, don't use 4000K, use 3000K or less. Some in the lighting industry adopted that, but the lighting industry in general rejected it. I think primarily because they had huge warehouses full of 4000K, then they naturally wanted to sell those. So there was a significant, I wouldn't say backlash, but confrontation between what the AMA was advising from a health standpoint and what the lighting industry wanted to sell because they had excess stock. After a few years, though, more and more papers came out, including some from within the IES. And finally, in 2022, their manual of what is recommended pretty much said what the AMA said in 2016. So hopefully there's no further controversy on that. But there are still 4000K lights being produced, and there are certain lighting companies, Florida Lighting, Power and Light, and Duke in North Carolina, and parts of Texas come to mind. But much of the rest of the country is on board, and you'll see in many parts of the country 3000K or lower lighting being adopted. And in some parts of the country, like Seattle, they're taking down their old 4000K lights and putting up 3000 on main thoroughways and 2700 on side streets. Now, that's an added expense since these lights were perfectly functional. And it's not a system that it's not a strategy that many cities can adopt because of the cost, unless there's a huge public outcry, which there is in many places. So the good strategy going forward is every time a bad light is taken down, don't put up another bad light to replace it. Put up a 2700. They even have 2400 lights now available for the exact same cost. So over time, things can get better without really costing anything if you do the right thing going forward.
Is it only a Kelvin thing in your mind, or I know we talked to LED because other light sources have 4K and 5K.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of stuck with this system because that's what the industry uses is a Kelvin thing. It's a ridiculous way to judge a light. For example, if you had a pure blue LED, you could meet the standard by surrounding it with red LEDs, and the average is 3000K, even though you're still producing the same amount of blue LED. So the best way would be to actually do a spectrum analysis, but that's complicated. Most cities wouldn't have the wherewithal to understand those measurements, and none of the lighting companies put those kind of measurements out. So we're kind of stuck with that. But in general, we should reject 4,000K lighting, and kind of the new quasi standard now is 2,700. But 3,000 is okay. That's 21% blue. 2,700 is about 15% blue. And there are a couple places that are even using 2,400 blue, which is 2,400K, which is only about 12% blue. So that's the way to go for the future.
Are you talking interior and exterior? I know exterior for sure, but interior as well?
Exterior
What about
street
interior?
lighting.
The interior doesn't matter?
Well, interior, you'd never use 4,000K. I mean, put one up in your house and you'll immediately break the bulb, I guarantee you. No one can stand that inside a house. If you don't believe me, buy one and put it up. Anyone who's listening to this, and you'll immediately understand. But indoors, 24 to 100 is ideal. That's what we call warm LEDs. In office buildings in daytime only, 3,000 to 4,000K is acceptable because that's a work environment in daylight atmosphere, but you don't want that at nighttime anywhere.
Colleen Harper said of our podcast, who is the executive director of the IES, she said that your view was one-sided and narrow, and that
Well,
and that this is an incredibly important subject, not conducive, and that your remarks were not conducive to people being educated about the IES, correlated color temperature, spectrum, etc. And they denied in their statement aligning their 2022 standards to the AMA report. They denied doing that.
okay, well, all I can say is there are 2022 standards, which were given to me by an IES member. I didn't say they align. I said they came a long way to meeting the objections of the AMA back in 2016, and I stand by that. Compare their 22 manual compared to their 2018 or 2014 manual, and you see there's been a dramatic change. So I'm sure they didn't mean to align with the AMA, but they're certainly a hell of a lot closer to AMA's 2016 stance than they used to be. And what else was I going to say? As far as denying that they caused any harm or problems, I mean, why did they change? They changed for a reason, and I think that you'll have to ask them for their reason for change. So change only occurs when there's a lot of public pressure.
The other thing that they had said in their statement on Inside Lighting was that the AMA report was responded to appropriately, both internally between the organizations and externally to the public by and I'm reading a quote here, by an organization of our structure, goals, and composition. Anything else implied or reported is one person's perception of communication about an issue that took place almost a decade ago. So they're denying what you said back on the Restoring Darkness podcast. They said that they responded to you politely and appropriately. And I don't think that's true.
Well, all I can say is I got many nasty emails, and there was one person in the IS who specifically sent a demand retraction of the 2016 paper. That's not polite. I'll leave it at that. And our response was a letter back saying, if you have scientific data that contradicts anything in that paper, present it to us and we'll be happy to have a discussion. They did not produce any such papers, so we didn't change our stance.
And it turned out that you were right in the end because they've adjusted their standards accordingly. Greg,
Believe so.
is it possible for people to admit they're wrong? Like that's kind of what I see here at the bottom line of it is that the IES doesn't want to say, you know what, we were wrong and we shouldn't have done that. And while the AMA paper is not totally incorporating all the aspects of lighting, they were right about this particular issue. Why is that so difficult, Greg?
Well,
In my opinion, well,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I'll
I
jump
can
into, but
EIS.
go ahead.
That you'll have to ask them. Industries from tobacco industry to the oil industry to everything else you can think of will always deny that they've done any wrong, but they will behind the scenes adjust as they need to when there's pressure.
Greg, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I just think anytime you ask an industry to make a blanket statement, they're never going to do that. Like they'll always say, "Yeah, we've done the good thing here," but they're never going to say, "We were wrong." Do you see that anywhere? Has that ever happened? An industry coming out and saying we were wrong? Sorry.
But I think it's pretty devastating for the lighting industry to be, and Dr. Motta compared it because there's what we're seeing is there like the damage that Mark Baker's not right about everything in lighting, and he was on the show recently. That's the co-host of the Restoring Darkness podcast, Dr. Motta, and the executive director of Soft Lights Foundation, Mark Baker. Uh, People are have been damaged and continue to be hurt by bad LED lighting, and Dr. Motta just pointed out the oil industry and the tobacco industry, and he's putting the lighting industry into a category with them of people that are denying harms and are not willing to walk back mistakes. I think that's very damaging for our industry, Dr. Motta. And I think that there are times when you need to step forward, and this is one of those instances, so that the public knows that this type of lighting you do not want it in your home. I was in a hotel recently, and all the lighting in the hotel was not 4,000, 5,000 K,
Oh,
and
geez.
it was absolutely awful. Actually, I really didn't like it at all. It was everywhere, all the flat panels too, round 6-inch flat panels. So, Dr. Motta is saying the lighting industry is on a path to be like the tobacco or the oil industry, willing to deny actual harms and pollution and health effects. I think you're
Well,
correct on that, Dr. Motta.
they've made a change, and I commend them for that. They have corrected with their latest manual, so they should stand up for that and say we're happy to be on the right side now. I don't want to
Yeah,
attack them now because their actual manual says do the right thing and to use the right lighting. They have some exceptions there for I think intersections and high pedestrian areas where I think the blue is too high, but that can be discussed. In general, their street lighting recommendations are markedly improved.
and so what you said towards the beginning, a practical way to do it is when it's needed to replace it and start going
Correct.
lower Kelvin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't replace a bad part with another bad part. Replace it with a better part.
I think there's an argument that this is the first step on many steps towards improving a technology that, I'll be honest with you, we really don't know what its impacts are. And I think that is fair to say even now, Dr. Motta, that there's not just the color temperature or the nanometers, but there's also a glare issue. There's other flicker issues and other things that are causing problems with LEDs that I don't think we've tackled yet as an industry.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, I only disagree in one part that we don't know the damage being done. We do know the damage being done. It's well documented. The Dark Sky International now has on their website uh, a way to look up articles on lighting and damage to human and environmental health. They have 5,000 articles there. I mean, when you have 24 published papers in the last 10 years about breast cancer, all saying the same thing from around the world, a 14 to 17% increase in breast cancer in women who are exposed to high blue lighting. At that point, even though it's all epidemiologic evidence, you have to say that's pretty strong evidence. If it was one study, you'd say we need to do more studies. When it's 3, you said there's something to this. When there's 24, okay, stop beating around the bush. This is a danger. And as far as the environment goes, read anything by Travis Longcore from University of Southern California, who's one of the more prolific authors on this. Just look at the fact that we have 40% less insects in the entire world than we had 30 years ago. And the entomologists are calling this an insect apocalypse. There's a reason for that, and that's going to harm us in terms of pollinating our crops and food source for fish and for birds and other animals. So we have a major problem on our hands, and the lighting industry needs to partner, recognize that their products, if made incorrectly, can cause harm. If done properly, are a welcome relief.
Whew. I think that's a good place to call it. We appreciate your time, your courage, and your willingness to come on and speak to this topic, Dr. Motta. Do you have any final thoughts for the Get a Grip on Lighting audience?
No, just speak up when you see bad lighting or insist, especially in those 3 states I mentioned. They're kind of outliers. Many parts around the country have done the right thing. I mean, Seattle, Davis, California, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, they hate these lights so much, they're actually spending extra money to take them down and put in up proper lighting. I mean, you don't realize how bad they are until you're exposed to them. Then suddenly you say, I feel like I'm in a prison, which is a typical response when you have those kind of lights outdoors. So nowadays, we even have 2400 lights with proper shielding and back shielding produced out of the box. That's been used in most recently in a town called Sherburne in Massachusetts. And the townspeople are tickled pink. They sent me some examples of their lighting, and it's fabulous. No light goes in the bedroom. Streets are precisely well lit. The light only goes on the street. You don't have glare in your eyes, so they say they can drive better at night. Why don't we do that everywhere? Think about it. Instead, we have companies like Florida Power and Light that have huge stocks of 4000K light and repeatedly keep putting up bad lighting to the detriment of the citizens and the environment. There's no need for that.
Wow. Well, it looks like we have another a long way to go on this, because I actually think we're still discovering, how light works and how it affects things. And I think it was a massive change to LED, and people assume that all electrical light sources are the same, and they're definitely not. That's for sure. Dr. Motta, thank you for your time. I'd like to invite all of our listeners to go to griplocksystems.com, Greg Garrett. Get a grip.
That's right. They mentioned they're going to be at Light Fair, which is another key thing that every listener should do, and check out their grip lock system. It is way better than chain. I can speak from experience of 20 years or so hanging fixtures. All we use is grip lock.
Don't be a loser. Don't use jack chain, and make sure you're in Light Fair, May 4th to 8th. I'm going to be there with Greg, and we're going to be live streaming. Of course, if you have light bulbs in a warehouse, that's right, light bulbs in a warehouse, you got to join the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. And if you want to get good with lighting controls, which is a great way to improve lighting by being able to control it, change the color temperature, turn it off, these kinds of things, you got to sign up. Lightivation in June. We're holding a certification there. Check it out. It's all available on nil.org. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.